Yes, sir.
I'm going to play a devil's advocate for
Sure.
1 minute. Does term limits usurp the power of the people then?
Absolutely not, if it's in the Constitution. That's the whole point. The Constitution cannot be unconstitutional. For instance, the Supreme Court has said 1 man, 1 vote. That's Colgo v. Green and a bunch of other cases. Does that mean that it's unconstitutional for the Constitution also to say that Wyoming, with 470,000 people, gets 2 members of the Senate, the same as California, which has 35 million? No, it can't be unconstitutional because it's in the document. So if it's put in the document, plus the fact that that's been tested, remember we've had term limits for president for a long time, since right after Roosevelt left office. So it is clearly constitutional, whether you look at it from a theoretical standpoint or from the standpoint of actual decisions. That's the argument that people that don't want term limits, I would see. When a congressman's been there for a long time, you know what happens? They have staff, and each year they hire new staff, and they take the old members of their staff and they start sticking them in important positions in committees. By the time they've been around for 10 terms or so, they may have 25 people on their staff, but they've got 25 other people salted in committee staffs all around the Congress. Their power grows with every term they continue to stay. And this, by the way, affects both Republicans and Democrats. If you look at the spending curve, the willingness to vote for additional spending and additional taxing goes up at the same rate among Republicans and Democrats. Republicans start at a lower level, but the longer they stay in Congress, it's like bananas. You can't keep them around the house too long or they go funny and smell and draw flies. Same thing happens to congressmen, same thing happens to senators. But what they argue, and the minions who depend upon them, because when you get that kind of importance and you get a committee chairmanship, then, say it's banking, then you've got the bank on the left bank of the Mississippi willing to send you money to get reelected, even though they don't care about you personally, and they've never even sent anybody to your district. But your power reaches them, so therefore they pay for it. And they tend to support those people when they say, oh, term limits is going to interfere with the right of the people to reelect me. No, you get reelected because large piles of money come in the door. It's all legal. It's essentially a bribery system. And the bribes are first paid to the congressman or senator for favorable consideration of whatever the bribee is interested in. And then the member sends that out via the media to cajole, or by straight bribery, by such methods as additional benefits from law X, law Y, law Z, in order to get people to vote for him. And as the song says, and the money goes round and round and it comes out here. But we don't call it bribery, we call it campaign finance. That's not free will of the people. If the challengers had equal money to the people who are in there now, they'd knock a lot of them out of office. But they don't have, and they're never going to have, equal money. And that's the truth. Yes, ma'am.
I want to digress back
Sure.
to our first question,
Okay.
and not to dwell on this, but the founders of our country wrote our Constitution on Mosaic law. That's Moses in the Bible, Numbers and Deuteronomy. And didn't they consider themselves a Christian country where religion was free to be practiced, but they considered it a Christian country of writing the Constitution on Mosaic law?
Most of them were Christians. And by the way, I can go a little further than what you just said. Jefferson was quite a student of other forms of government, including the Iroquois Compact, and including what the Old Testament described of how the Israelites were organized, with groups of 100 under a leader, those leaders in groups of 1,000, and so on up. And he says in his writings that this is part of the reason that his philosophy was that all governmental decisions should be made at the lowest practical level, closest as they possibly can be to the people who are going to be affected by it. Now, does the fact that he drew that concept from reading with care the Old Testament, which is Judaism as well as Christian, make it either Judaic or Christian? As a political concept that is no longer religious, thou shalt not kill is a religious concept. And if you read the Talmud, you know that killing in self-defense is not counted as killing. I don't know if you're aware of that, but it's true. So self-defense is an excerpt. But laws against murder are not commandments in that sense. They're not religious, they're secular. And I'll stand on that until the cows come home. Most of the people who wrote our founding documents were, in fact, practicing Christians. Some of them were Jewish. Some people argue today that there were agnostics in the bunch. If they were, they didn't stick their heads up, because that was not a good thing to be. I mean, that's why Paine lost all of his friends at the end of his life. They said, you're an agnostic, and therefore we'll have nothing further to do with you. And it was sad to see his friends fall away. So the dominant thinking of the people who wrote it was Christian, because most of them were Christian, and there were a few deists. However, that doesn't make it a Christian document. We were also very careful to keep some of our concepts to ourselves. Dr. Benjamin Rush, this can be said now, Dr. Benjamin Rush, my good friend, and the man to whom I introduced Thomas Paine when I sent him to America, and Tom Paine, were among the founders of the first abolitionist society in the United States. And Paine wrote for us a document about how slavery was a barbaric practice and it should be abolished. Well, what would have been the public career of Benjamin Franklin had it come out during my lifetime that I had belonged to such a society, much less supported what Thomas Paine wrote? It would never have occurred. And you would be singing God Save the Queen before NFL games because you never would have gained your independence. And that did not come out until after my death, which is as it should be, unfortunately. You can't escape your times. You do what you can in the times that you live in. There are things that you can do today, and talk about today, that we could not do then. And I'm speaking for myself. Me. Yes, sir.
Ben, talk about